All right. Oh, wow. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's FAC Finance and Appropriations Committee with the Columbus City School Board of Education. I hope all are well. Thank you for joining us today. We'll go ahead and just get started. Can we go and approve the minutes?
Call the roll, please. Mr. Board Member Brown?
Thought I did that already. Here.
Board Member Cole?
Present.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Ms. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Jordan? Mr. Miller? Board Member Ragland?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Today's meeting will be, of course, our discussion of the monthly finance report, our quarterly reviews, and some treasury officers for our treasurer update. And then we'll go into adjournment. So let's get started and move right on into approval. Well, we've got our, I'm just totally fuzzy. Either way, let's go ahead and go into our monthly report.
You want to approve the minutes, Chair? Cole?
Yes, I thought we just did that.
No, sir, we called the roll.
We called the roll.
And
Thank you.
now we'll move on
Now
to the
we'll
minutes.
move on to
It's
approve
okay.
the minutes. Thank you very
We got
kindly.
your back, all right? We got you.
Appreciate it. So if we
moved.
can do that. Awesome.
Second.
Motioned and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Now, moving right along, as Kermit the Frog would say, monthly finance report.
Okay. All right, thank you, Chair Cole. This is the monthly financial report for October. On a year-to-date basis, our revenues continue to run under plan by $67 million. Expenditures also continue to run under plan by $83 million. For the month, revenues ran about $15 million under plan, again, primarily due to state aid, as I'll describe for you here in a minute. And expenditures were about $20 million under plan for the month. Cash balance stood at $372 million, about $16 million above plan. Again, these variances are primarily indicative of the change in state funding and how it impacted our revenues and expenditures, as I detailed for you in the presentation last month on the 5-year forecast. On the revenue side, year-to-date state aids, almost $70 million below plan. I believe that I will take the November 5-year forecast that you've seen and the board is going to approve next week, and I will incorporate that as our new annual spending plan. And so you'll see different year-to-date variances come out of that when we report November at our December finance meeting. All other revenue sources net to about $2.8 million above plan. Property taxes have not changed. We're not in a collection period or settlement period at about $6.2 million above plan. And other local runs at about $2.2 million above plan. Primarily, some pilots have come in. You never know when they're going to come in necessarily, so they're running ahead of plan. And other financing at $5.5 million under plan, are related to estimates for and timing on transfers and advances. So nothing operational there. When we break down that other revenue category, you'll see here is property tax allocation, the homestead and rollback exemption. Again, no activity, but it's still at that year-to-date very close, very little year-to-date variance. As I said, other revenues above plan and other financing sources below plan. I will continue to share with you this kind of quarterly analysis to see how those variances play out, to see if a quarterly look makes some sense to us in terms of analyzing variances. So here, this is a good example where you see the variance primarily in the timing of the receipt of real property taxes, and that variance simply worked itself out in the next month or so. So I'm tracking this just to show you a total revenue level. Let's look at those variances month to month and see what the quarterly picture tells us, or what those monthly pictures tell us that the quarterly picture wouldn't. So just some information to keep an eye on. Highlights on the expenditure side, again, community school vouchers and community school and vouchers, that deduction, non-existent now. It was in the May forecast, which is the basis for the plan, does not exist at this point in time. So almost $67 million in under plan behavior, but that's because they don't exist. Personnel is running about 15.9 or million below plan. And this month, we were actually very close to plan. We were 988,000 under plan, and that was only 1.3%. So that's, we're just coming closer on plan now. There's various line item variances in there, but I feel good that we're on a month-to-month basis, at least this past month, very close to plan. And actually, I said under. I believe we were actually over.
Over,
Over
just
this
slightly
month.
over, yes.
Slightly over plan, which is typically not the case unless I misjudged the 3-pay month. This happened to be a 3-pay month, so we were pretty much spot on that estimate.
If you would, Mr. Treasurer, because you did mention that there are just some slight variables, some minor variables that attribute to this, very, I would say, I want to be very thoughtful in what I say. I don't want to call it insignificant, but just nominal kind of overage. Let's look at it from that perspective. But can you just name a few of those variables?
Sure. Actually, the major contributor to the monthly over plan amount was in the area of substitute pay on the certificated side. Based upon what we had in the annual amount and then what the monthly plan would look like, we were about just $1 million over plan for that. The other revenue lines were under plan, or the other expenditure lines were really under plan in the salary and wages line. So it was really the substitute cost that drove that. I think that's a result of more the construct of the plan rather than of our behavior, although we are back in school. So part of our last year's behavior has influenced the layout of that plan month to month. So it's just in that construct of the plan, I believe.
Yes, sir. I mean, it helps too that we doubled the pay to ensure that we had, competitive pay for substitute teachers, to kind of close that gap for educators in the district. So again, I definitely want for folks who are listening to understand that we value classroom instruction. We value having the right professionals there. And because the state gave us the latitude to be able to do it, we wanted to make sure we increase pay opportunity for substitute teachers. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Breaking down the all other expenditures, you'll see here purchase services are absent the charter school because we call that out and report that separately. Purchase services running under plan, about $3.5 million. Supplies above plan, $1.5 million. Capital outlay a little bit above plan, and then those variances in the other categories are not material. But all in all, the non-personnel line items net to about $2.7 million above plan. So all in all, on target. There we go. I added this month this quarterly view on expenditures just to begin to track that. Now, because we are so heavily weighted by personnel, some of the non-personnel variances essentially get lost in the sauce. They're just overwhelmed by the 70% or 85% that we're now spending. Well, not that we're now spending, but because of how the funding has changed, it more accurately reflects that 85% of our expenditures are personnel. So this total line is pretty much going to mimic what we're doing in personnel. So I don't know that we'll see the kind of quarterly variances that we saw in revenue. But as we talked about this, I think what I'll do as we go along is I might separate out the personnel behavior month to month from all the non-personnel behavior month to month to see if the variances jump off the page at us that way. So we'll drill down on this as time goes by, but this is just something that I added for this month. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my report for the month of October. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Any questions at this point in time? Committee? Okay. All right. Moving on to the quarterly reviews. Welcome, good doctor.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I think I'm going to try to use this clicker. I'm with you this afternoon to share some information about where we are in our ESSER planning and expenditures. I think Ryan's going to bring up some slides. So as he's doing that, just to set the context for the next couple of minutes, these are funds that we have received from the federal government to respond to needs that were created as a result of the pandemic. And we use these funds for a variety of purposes. There we go. Great. So first, I just wanted to share that the timeline for expenditure, for fund expiration has not changed since we talked a couple of months ago. This slide shows you the timeline for each of the 3 ESSER funds, and the third one we usually refer to as ARP ESSER, but ESSER 3 are really interchangeable. And just to call out again, it's that third one that we are required to ensure that at least 20% of our funds are used for learning recovery. You'll see through the next couple of slides that we're well above that 20% in planning as well. But again, these funds will expire September 2024. Just a review, as we've done in the past, a list of the allowable expenditures. We're expected to use these funds to help schools prevent, prepare, and respond to the pandemic. To go along with this presentation, you have on board docs, and I believe in front of you as well, an executive summary that goes into more detail. I'm going to really hit high level in the next few slides. So this chart again provides a list of all of our new funding. I would draw your attention to the fact that we actually received a slightly larger award for higher education, and those funds are now extended until 2022. So a little more money in higher ed and a little bit longer to use them. Again, just a reminder that as we carried out our planning for ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, we considered these factors. This guidance comes from our partners at Great City Schools, so it's certainly in alignment with the other work that the board has been doing. I mentioned this last time, but I think it's worth saying again. Anytime a strategy proposal comes in, it goes through a rigorous funding application, which is an internal process, and the strategy must show alignment to strengthening reading proficiency, developing portrait-ready graduates, and closing opportunity gaps. So again, trying to make sure that we have tight alignment to the other work of the board. If you happen to hover over this presentation in board docs, you can actually open the application and see all the different questions. The internal process mirrors what we will have to report at the end to state and federal compliance. I thought you'd be interested in this one this month. This chart shows where we are in alignment with our planning and use of funds. And I think what I point out here is that there's a nice balance. The funds are being used certainly for technology for students, but you see curriculum initiatives, you see spending around Blend Ed, which is our all online virtual program. You see student supports, transportation has some strategies in this pie chart. And so again, I think it shows a nice balance in your executive summary, which can also be found on board docs. We go into more detail around the specific strategies within each piece of the pie. Sure.
Where would special education fall under any one of these categories?
So our special education strategies that are specific to students with IEPs are found in both transformation and leadership and the K-12 curriculum pieces. But I'd be more than happy when we come back next time. We can, like I'm going to do on a couple strategies here, we could highlight specifically what we're doing for our special education
That would be
students.
beautiful, and even in fact, identify, you know, that number along with it, the quantitative amount.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I'm excited this month to share a couple of highlights of some strategies that the district has already begun to implement. And again, more detail is in your executive summary. But I thought you'd be interested to know that we've invested to date nearly $6 million in additional technology for students and staff, with the intention to spend $18 million. So we've started that investment. I have a little timeline at the top of the slide. Of course, in the 1920 school year, that's when we began to roll out technology, when we had to abruptly move to remote instruction. Of course, we had to very quickly get devices and internet access for students and staff. So you see that in the 1920 school year. In 2021, technology was the primary mode of instruction for most of the year. And while we did come back into school in the spring, you'll remember that we were in a hybrid environment. And so having technology in the hands of students and staff was critical. And then this year, we're continuing with our technology rollout. There's an extensive inventory that's being conducted at this point in the year in partnership with our information technology team. And part of that inventory is really identifying the gaps between where do we need to supply additional technology for students and staff, and what kind of devices are working well for kids. So you will see that on the board agenda, every couple of months you are approving requisitions for additional technology purchase. We're finding that those Chromebooks had a rough ride in some cases when they went home. And so our IT folks are certainly needing to address that. They're getting replacements, they are repairing where possible, but the bottom line is the priority is making sure that students and staff have the technology that they need to continue their education, whether in school or at home. And I included a quote in there from one of our stakeholders that provides some insight into how that technology is being used in the classroom. I'm going to shift gears and talk for a moment about custodians. So in our initial plan, when we first received those ESSER 1 dollars, the plan was really more around security, around safety, around plexiglass, masks, hand sanitizer, and one of the programs that was prioritized at that time was adding custodial staff. And so we were able to hire, you'll see we've hired 52 additional custodians. We need to get to 68 to meet our goal. And hiring is still in process, that's ongoing. But we have now been able to provide an additional custodian in each high school. And again, a little call out, obviously we all know the important work that our custodians do in our schools. And certainly we are still in the midst of a pandemic and making sure that our buildings are safe and clean, that the facilities are meeting expectations and that we're following protocol. It's critical to have the additional custodial staff.
Let me just ask a quick question. If there aren't any
So in hiring this additional 52 custodial staff, as I understand it, in our 109 plus buildings, we have one head custodian during the day that is strictly that one personnel doing custodial work. Is that correct? Is that what current situation is right now? Or have we added 52 to support having two custodians during the day, one head and one additional?
So we have added 52 in addition to that one head custodian that you referred to. But we are not yet at 2 full-time during the day for every building. The custodial services team prioritized our high schools due to their size, and they have received additional daytime support.
Okay, yep, I'd love to learn more about this. I don't want to extend it out
Sure.
in this particular forum, but I definitely would love, Madam Superintendent, to have us all informed a bit more about how that process is going, how we're strengthening our front line, so to speak, around safety of our students and staff. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I would call out that to date, our investment has been about $1.8 million for the additional custodial support. This is an area that we will definitely need to revisit as we go forward to determine what's the right number of custodians for our schools. And right now, we are paying for these additional custodians on our time-bound funds. So should we decide that we need to keep this number or a higher or lower number, we will need to come back to you with recommendations about how we fund those after 2024.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Ragland?
Yeah, and this is one of the areas that we had discussed, as we were learning that we would receive some funds for for COVID relief, and we understood that there were some things that we may want to shift general fund dollars towards sustaining post-pandemic. Obviously, the cleanliness and safety of our buildings is of utmost importance, and this may be something that we might want to start identifying other resources for, now, so that we can make sure that this number continues and we're able to maintain that in the years to come. I just, this is a great announcement today that we have these folks in place, but keeping them is vital to the future success of the district.
Nope, I agree. In fact, I think the FMP process, as we go further in discussion on that and what those drivers are, along maintaining or building capacity where the superintendent treasurer have identified for us to look at, I think that's where we'll begin to peel those layers even more, right? Get more discovery around that. So thank you.
Absolutely. And the last strategy that I want to highlight for you is training and development. So the training and development team has launched. We've talked about this for a long, long time, about the need for training. We do a nice job of professional development for our teachers and our principals, but we've really not had a directed investment in training and development for our classified staff. And so as you see on the screen, that training and development has started. And they are focusing initially on instructional assistants, secretaries, and human resources. Lunch and learns for food service staff and bus drivers will begin this month. You might be interested to know that Google, Kronos, Munis, Red Rover, using your Outlook for email, and stress management are currently the most requested topics for training for our classified staff. This next slide shows you participant numbers, and I would just draw your attention to the fact that they got started with some initial sessions, and you see a dozen people here and there, and then on Records Day last month, 302 secretaries and instructional assistants participated in day-long professional development opportunities, and you can see the topics there. And then the feedback was so great, folks talked to each other, and between the PD Day and Records Day, 100 more participants joined for the next opportunity. So we are very excited to add to the training and development options for classified staff. I just want to share with you a quote from one of our instructional assistants. She said, "I just wanted you to know how happy I was with the PD for instructional assistants. Of course, the library training was top-notch as usual, but the training I attended was excellent. It was well-paced, informative, had room for us to have voice and ask questions. I really felt like I was part of a group, and I hope we have more opportunities for training." So we are intending to add to those offerings, certainly on every professional development and Records Day. There will be a day of training, and then, as you heard me say, in addition, they're offering lunch and learns, actually going to the bus compounds to offer training and development for our drivers. Drivers who, their most requested topic is, how do I use my email? Composing email in using Outlook. I wanted to just end with one other quick mention of a district recognition. Last month, Andrea Richardson, our Director of State and Federal Programs, and I had the opportunity to present at the state conference for state and federal program administrators. And we were asked to present on the district impact report. That is an additional layer of reporting that we have implemented from the beginning. We worked with Mrs. Smith's office to ensure that that reporting would meet the needs of our federal reporting, but also district and other stakeholders as well. And we had great response to that impact report, and were recognized by the state association as a model for others. So I wanted you to know that Columbus City Schools is well represented in this work, and it's been a great collaboration. I'm going to end with just a quick comment about future funds. So what I've talked about today so far is all wrapped up in our ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. As we move into planning for that third ESSER, we will be doing significant stakeholder outreach. There is a link currently on the district website. If you look up ESSER in the search tab, it takes you to a wonderful interactive page that lists the district high-level strategies, but there's also a link there for stakeholders to give us input on our planning. Have we prioritized to the things that you would want us to prioritize? What input do you have? And so I'm going to call that out regularly as we do these updates, but we'll also be seeking input in a variety of other ways to ensure that our whole community feels that our plan in the district use of funds represents your goals in what the community is interested in as well. And so just want to give that call out that we'll be seeking additional stakeholder input. And with that, I would take any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions by the committee at this point, Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Real good report and good information, especially those last several things. Had a question about the training and development sessions. And I do not want anybody to take this to mean that I don't value highly non-substantive education, substantive kid work, because all these other factors are incredibly important. But it sounds as though overwhelmingly this training and development focuses on the technical side of the job, the logistics, the just all the mechanics that go with it. Is that accurate, or is there any of this that is really about improving education for kids and academic scholarship?
Thank you so much for that question. So I want to manage your expectations that this is a small and new team. They have done extensive survey work. They've been working closely with Dr. James in his team. So they've just gotten started. What I will say that they have already begun is with the instructional assistants. And that's certainly focused on, do you understand what all of our curricular resources are? Do you see how your work with students as you support the classroom teacher is in alignment to these resources? What additional skills and strategies do you need? So for the instructional assistants, it is very much focused on those student achievement outcomes.
That's great, and that's helpful. As I'm just saying that and talking with you about it, it occurs to me that even though most of it isn't going to be dealing with the substance side of things, but it's more on the mechanical side, nevertheless, all of these staff have some connection to kids, whether it's passing them in the hallway or driving the bus or just, I don't know exactly what the secretary's job is these days. I know what it was when I went to school, and it was really big. That's the person who ran the building.
Still is.
Still is. But keeping a focus on how do we improve that aspect of things in relation to kids or parents would probably be a good thing.
Absolutely. They have prioritized customer service skills, de-escalation with students and adults, not just for secretaries, but for all staff. And as when we have professional development days that focus, for example, on equity topics, there will be a strand going forward for classified staff within their role as well. And certainly any work that we do to build the skills of our classified staff to better interact with technology is going to end up helping them to do their jobs more effectively and efficiently.
That all sounds good. Keep up the good work.
So I'll plan to provide some high-level updates of that work as we go forward. And next month, certainly, or a couple of months from now, next time we provide the update, we can focus on students with IEPs.
Thank you for that. Are there any additional questions before we move forward? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, comment?
Not
Me.
Oh, yes, sir.
Me.
Go ahead.
I
I'm
have
sorry.
a
You know, I hear, but I can't see that well. So.
that would be me. I just want to commend Catherine in the work that she's been doing, the role that she took on maybe about a year ago, and then to set up and manage these federal funds and to set up a mechanism to track all that we need to track and report out on to state and federal agencies, and not the least of which who we report back to are folks here and board members. And you are not at a loss for questions. And those questions have led to a morphing of how she reports in terms of both format and content. And she works very closely with my team to ensure that the numbers all match up and that the processes are in place for making sure budgets are done at the state level and that they appear in our record. I mean, it's just it's a big process, and she has to work across to outside agencies as well as intra the district, like with our office, to get all this done, to come to you and present this kind of information. So from my perspective, it's a great working relationship, and I think it's great information, and I love the way it's morphed over time to give you the feedback that you want to have to understand what are we doing with the ESSER funds in essence. So that just want to make sure that it's just from as one colleague to another to call that out and say thanks.
No, I thank you very much, Mr. Treasurer. You're absolutely right on point in terms of, how your report shows the substance of not only the dollars that are being expended, but exactly its impact, its planned impact even. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to our enterprise report.
Let me give a little intro to this. This is something that we're adding for presentation to FAC on a quarterly basis. And we, here we typically talk about just the general fund. It's the largest fund where most of our expenditures, the vast majority of our expenditures, are lodged. And there are, though, this category of funds, and we thought it would be appropriate to bring this particular category of funds before the board, that we call enterprise funds. And enterprise funds are exactly what that term means. They are run and accounted for like an enterprise where you match revenues and expenditures. So the idea here is just to assess how are we doing on that relationship between generating revenues, specific revenues for these programs, and the related expenditures. And some of the funds require additional support, general fund support over time, and it would be good just to take a look at those. They're a little bit unique in that regard. So that was kind of why we picked these funds, this handful. There's, what are there, 6? There's 5 enterprise funds that we're going to discuss this evening. And just to give you that perspective, it's just a different, we view these activities just a little bit differently than in the general fund. They're all expense centers. We don't have revenue centers. So we have only expense centers, really. So I don't want to say that this is a profit center, but in the private sector, this is how you might look at that they're responsible for generating, collecting, accessing revenue to match or exceed their expenditures in those related programs. So that's what an enterprise fund is all about. And Scott has worked with all 5 of the leaders of these programs to put this together. And we limited them to just a handful of slides and set kind of a time limit of 5 minutes on them. So let's see how we do. With that, I'll turn it over, I think, to Scott to start them off.
And I do want to correct what I said because I said 5, but there's actually 4 enterprise funds. So the FAC has seen this in the past. We focused on those 4. We added a 5th to it after the last time we did the presentation. I think the committee wanted to see some information regarding the athletic fund. So the athletic fund is not one of those enterprise funds. So as we'll get through that, I just want to kind of call that out. So that's an addition to the presentation we've seen that we do these on a quarterly basis. So somebody's moving forward here. Not sure what's going on here. Trying to get us back to where the beginning. There we go. Okay. So what we've got here is you will see just a preview of these reports. The Food Service Fund, Joe Brown will make the presentation. Adult Education, as Mr. Ed O'Reilly. Latchkey Fund with Rochelle Wilkerson. The Athletic Fund, Dr. Vincent Clarino. And the WCBE Fund, this is going to be the Scott Show. This is going to be the Scott Varner, Scott Wortman tag team show here, correct? Got them both there. So we'll kind of jump into it. Each slide that we see We'll start off with just very dry, boring accounting, governmental authority, the purpose, classifications of the funds. And then, so each slide will have that, and so you can see that if you have trouble sleeping tonight, if you want to know the details of the ORC code, 3313.81 and why the food service fund was established. It's there if you want that, but that's not the meat of the presentation. We'll get into this, and then I'll turn this over to Joe on the next slide. Each of the folks are going to talk about program highlights for their operations, some of the impact that they have felt in regards of COVID and what it's done to their operations. And then you'll see 5-year historical revenue, expense, and cash values, as well as kind of where the drivers of the revenue and expenses. So that's what you'll see here. I will quit talking and turn it over to Mr. Brown, who is up on the screen in front of you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Board Member Cole, Treasurer Bohoric, and members of the committee. Yes, I would love to talk about food service. And we do, to Treasurer Bohoric's point, we understand that we're a business within a business, and it's our job to take care of our kids without impacting the overall financials of the district as best we can. And we take that role very seriously. The food service fund, just so you know, we, and I think you all probably are aware, we do participate in the community eligibility provision. And what that does is that allows us to offer free breakfast and free lunch to all Columbus City School students. It has been a huge benefit to our students, takes away the stigma of a student who may require a free or reduced price meal by having them available for everybody else. The other thing I've always said when we shifted that, we used to be an organization that was focused on collecting applications and collecting money. And when we shifted the community eligibility provision, we became an organization that got to focus on our customers and focus on our food quality. And that was a big shift for us that has helped us over the years. The food service fund hasn't always had a positive impact on its fund, but over the past 5 years prior to the pandemic, the food service fund did contribute positively to its fund, to the point where it has helped us through this pandemic and help us carry through till we still do have a positive fund balance. When it comes to our business, participation is our largest driver for profitability. We would like to consider a lot of our expenses to be variable, but the bottom line is they're not as variable as participation is. So the best we can do to drive participation, the best we can do to drive profitability. We have benchmarked in the top quartile for both breakfast and lunch participation through the Council of Great City Schools for many, many years. So it's something that we track every year and something that we continue to look to drive. So COVID-19 has had this significant impact on our operations. As you probably are all aware, we have not stopped working. We've provided meals to our students through this entire pandemic from the beginning on. That being said, it has not been the same quantity of meals we provided when students were in school. So it has had driven down revenue significantly. We also saw a reduction in expenses during the pandemic, but that reduction in expenses was not proportionate to our revenue. Significantly more funds were lost in revenue than expenses. And again, as I said before, food service did provide meals to the community through strategically located sites throughout the city, really through the entire pandemic. And we're proud of that work. We feel that we provided a valuable service, not only to our students, but to our community. And it's one of the ways that we know we make a difference. So what this shows is our 5-year trend. And of note here that I want to share with you, if you look at 2019, from a cash standpoint, it shows that revenue were less than expenses. And that is absolutely true from a cash standpoint. I know Stan often talks of timing of payments. The reason for that is because we were owed approximately $6 million in federal reimbursement that we did not receive till the fiscal year 20 year for the district. So it looks like we lost money in fiscal year 19 and made money in fiscal year 20. where that is reversed in all actuality based on the number of meals we served and our expenses. We did make about $2.5 million in fiscal year 20 if that expense would have showed up in the right year. We did lose some money in fiscal year 20 because we shut down our schools early, and fiscal year 21 was a significant hit to our food service fund. But as I said, we still have a positive cash balance, and now with students back in school, we're moving back in the right direction again to further build that cash balance.
Basically, what you're saying is despite the fact that we are 100% subsidized, where we do see that fall or decrease in revenue is really a timing and accounts payable type situation? Is that it?
So I'm talking about specifically fiscal year 19. That is an accurate statement in fiscal year 19.
Okay.
Fiscal year 20 and 21 is an impact of the pandemic. We saw a reduction in expenses, but it did not equal the reduction in revenues that we saw. So from a purely operation standpoint, we lost about $1.1 million in fiscal year 20 and about $11 million in fiscal year 21. That being said, going into that year, we had over a $16 million fund balance. So that fund balance, so we have not impacted the general fund because of that. We've just decreased our fund balance that's available within the food service.
Any questions, anyone? Mr. Brown?
Just briefly, looking at this, there's a portion on the expense side for capital outlay. Is that specifically for replacement of major equipment or repairs and maintenance of major equipment to keep it, to provide a longer life for it? Or what is that?
So that primarily is replacement, and by larger equipment, it's got to be significant equipment, such as a walk-in cooler. You know, a standalone refrigerator wouldn't fit the definition of capital, but a walk-in cooler would. Another area where we spend capital is we have a truck fleet to deliver these meals to our schools, and we historically have bought 1 to 2 trucks on an annual basis to be able to keep that fleet running and taking care of our kids.
I guess the question, now that I understand that a bit better, is are we spending enough in that, you know, it's a small amount of the picture, but, well, I guess it's a large amount, but relative to the others, it's smaller. Are we spending enough there that we don't get into the hole as we did overall in the district with deferred maintenance?
So it's a loaded question, sir, because we always have an opportunity to spend more, but we are. Most of the equipment we have within our schools does not fit, or I should say a lot of the equipment we have within our schools doesn't fit the definition of a capital. So we have a lot of refrigeration that we buy every year, items like that aren't capital expenses, they're operational expenses. From a capital standpoint, because of our fund balance where it is, if we need to invest in capital within the district, we do invest in capital within the district. One of the big investments you'll see coming to the board meeting in December is we're looking to rebuild 6 walk-ins over the summer for next year, which is a significant expense for the district. And we're working through that process with our capital improvements team to be able to do that right. So I do feel comfortable in the money we spend in capital. Like I said, because of our fund balance and the opportunity we've had there to invest in our operations, I feel comfortable that we're spending the right amount. But make no mistake, we are an enterprise fund. So we evaluate every expense and make sure it's the right thing to do and it makes sense for our district and our students.
Thank you. That's
Thank you.
great.
Yes, sir.
All right, if there are no additional questions?
Chair Cole,
Yes, sir.
one piece that I do want to point out with all of these presentations Our team has worked with them to evaluate the loss of revenue and the impact that COVID had on that, to see if there's a possibility to recoup those dollars through our ESSER funds, which Catherine Mosier was just talking about. So that's a piece that we're looking through there that, yes, Joe was very fortunate they had a very, very healthy cash balance. He worked very, very hard to build, and COVID, didn't eliminate it, but it wiped out a big chunk of it. So we're looking to see if there's an opportunity to recoup those dollars that the food service operation lost, for example, through ESSER dollars. So those are things that we're working on with each of these budgets that you'll hear tonight. So we're looking for alternative ways to get back the funding that they would have had otherwise if everything was normal.
Okay. Just one last one very quickly, if you can. Is there any portion of your budget that you share by chance with our culinary program? So is there a curriculum component that could be or is combined?
So the culinary program is a standalone program, not that we don't support them and help them, but they take care of themselves and do a good job of that. I would like to share, since you asked the question, and I think it fits appropriately. We do contribute on the education side, though, and primarily that's through our farm to school program. We have a teacher that works within our department. We work with school gardens in a number of schools, and through partners in the community, as well as some food service funding, we take that to the classroom and to our kids. When students were home during the pandemic, we built take-home kits for students so that they could work through science projects and grow food at home and be able to work through that with their class. So we are always, first and foremost, at the end of the day, we know that the most direct way we contribute to student success is to make sure a student is well fed and prepared in the classroom to be able to learn. But we are always looking for ways within the guidelines of how we're allowed to spend our funds that we can further contribute to student education. And the farm to school program is one of those avenues that allows us to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I look forward to the opportunity. I'm going to pepper that a little bit, to the opportunity of seeing how we become more socially entrepreneurial in that space. The married curriculum with, community and student opportunity for fresh fruits and vegetables. So I hope that we're able to, and the administration is working with you to think that through a little further and grow it. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay.
Mr. Crowe,
Yes, ma'am.
just a quick question. So right now, there's no anticipated need to have any type of advance or transfer from the general fund to help the food service fund. Is that correct?
Scott can validate for me, but yes, ma'am. There is no need at this time to transfer general fund dollars over to the food service fund.
Especially if we're successful in getting ESSER funding to help with that revenue loss, that'll hopefully put them back to where they were.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
And I'll tell you, and not to belabor, this is a grand space from where we were before 5 years ago. Because I was one of those parents who, like many, was looking at young man, young lady, you owe X amount of dollars because you overspent on your food account. So this is when we were giving our kids cards to be able to go to the lunchroom and buy their lunches. And my son likes to eat. So he went and made some over expenditures, and then we would check the account and find out that we owed more than expected. And so many other families were in that same boat. And unfortunately, it seemed to have left us during that time in the red quite a bit. Am I mistaken?
There were a number of factors that put us in that situation, that being one of them. But we've, to your point, we've turned that corner, and that's not a place we plan on going back to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Moving forward.
Next one will be Mr. Arias, Mr. O'Reilly in the adult ed program.
Mr. O'Reilly, welcome, sir.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about adult ed this evening.
Absolutely.
Scott, are you able to put the slides up
Yes, sir.
on the screen? Perfect. Thank you so much. So first of all, we're going to really focus on the workforce portion of our work. I know you you're aware we have an Aspire program that provides high school equivalency and free English classes for our parents. That's all funded through a state grant, and it's on a per pupil basis. So it's that part is not really in an enterprise fund, but our workforce development is. So very big past year for us. In order for us, we're considered part of Ohio Department of Higher Education. So we are a post-secondary program for our workforce development. And part of being in that post-secondary world is we have to be nationally accredited. So we work through the Council on Occupational Education to be accredited. We went through our reaccreditation this year and we were affirmed. So we have accreditation through 2024. So that's a big piece for us. Why is that a big piece? Because without accreditation, you cannot offer federal financial aid and Pell Grants to students. 95% of our nursing students qualify for federal financial aid. So without the financial aid piece, we don't have a program. So I think you can see on the slide that between Pell Grants and federal direct loans, our students gained access to over $1 million of help this year. Nursing program does a nice job. Over 81% passing rate on the national test for practical nurses. That's based on first run. That's the first try. That is about 7% over the state average right now. So, and we continue to move that forward. When you see that we've served 154 and graduated 77 students in the fiscal year, that just means those other students are still in the pipeline. They haven't graduated yet. And then when we work through the Ohio Department of Higher Education, if we're doing all of our compliance work correctly and moving students through at the appropriate rates, they provide money for us. So that was the 444,000 indicated there. Scott, there, thank you. There's also some other grants available to us. So there's a Center for Training Excellence grants where we work with other area industries and businesses to help develop contract services. So one of the programs we had here was we are working with Columbus Works, and we developed a program where we are training students in Microsoft Office technologies so that they have some skill sets to go out and get a job. So we got some funding to do that work, and we continue to do that work. We're also part of Perkins Grant, not huge in comparison to the K-12 world, but that 128,000 does a nice job to support our program. We usually use that for various equipment. The Ed2Go program, we work with a number of companies in town that they need online training for their employees. We're kind of that go between Ed2Go and the businesses where we're the area provider for those online courses and career training for a number of businesses. And then also a big highlight in this past year as well for everybody is, we went from traditional to hybrid delivery over a weekend. That was a big lift for many of my staff members who've been teaching 20 years. I was right in front of people. We didn't miss a beat. Students still graduated on time. So, I take that as a program highlight for the year. Another great grant we got through Workforce Development Board is they paid full tuition to our program. We had to apply for it and say, here's what we were going to do to help support students. But they paid for 5 of our practical nursing students to complete the program. So that was a great grant to get and very helpful to those students, of course. And we were the first entity in the district to go back to in-person learning. By June of 2020, not in full basis, but on a limited basis, we were back. And I think we found some things through our process that probably helped the district out. So I also view that as a program highlight. Monetary wise, I think on the next slides. Oh, I was waiting on the monetary piece and I was one slide short. Sorry about that. We offer what's called high school diploma, and this is a program that we truly want to grow. It's a wonderful program. Students who are now 20 years and older, and I guess I want to call out Eric Roush here. He and I worked together with other entities. Prior to this past year, this was a program for students who are 22 and older. We really talked about what happens to students between 18 and 22 and how they can get lost in the system. So the law now reads that students can access this program when they hit age 20. And what this program allows students to do is work with us, get a passing score on the work keys test, get an industry credential, and we usually use the STNA credential for this. If they are successful in those two pieces, regardless of how many high school credits they had, they get a high school diploma from the state of Ohio. And that is a game changer for a lot of students who really struggled. Maybe their freshman, sophomore year dropped out for a variety of reasons, come back to us and really can't foresee themselves sitting for 15, 17 different high school credits. So we're able to get students through in an 8-month period of time under that program. We are going to grow that this year. We also get a little bit of money from Ohio Department of Education, and we work closely with Columbus State on the Ohio 22 adult diploma program. And I think our board members see those almost every board meeting and the consent agenda, where a number of new students are getting high school diplomas from Columbus City Schools. So that's a wonderful opportunity. And that's really through credit
Question.
recovery. So they're getting all the credits. Yes.
Board Member Brown.
Very quickly, you mentioned a credential that's typically used, ST.
State Tested Nursing Assistant.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Which leads to, it leads them down a pathway of healthcare and makes them eligible for jobs that are now in the, I want to say $17 an hour range to get them started.
Thank you.
So, I'll have to say that the government really took care of us in higher education through the pandemic, and it continues to be through CARES, American Rescue Plan, Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. We've gotten a lot of money from the government, and probably the biggest piece of that, and I highlighted that in red for you, is it allowed us to replace lost revenue. So what we did is we did a 3-year average of how many students we typically have, and then we showed them that our enrollment dropped because of the pandemic, and they reimbursed us from these funds for that amount. So this has really allowed us to keep our cash balance really at one of the highest levels we've had in years. Without their help, our nursing program would be in trouble right now. And we've used the money on the institutional portion. For those of you who aren't aware, we get 2 portions of grants. One's for institutional, and one is strictly for student grants, which we'll talk about in a moment. But we're not in trouble because of the pandemic, because we've gotten such great aid from the government. And those are some other expenses on how we use the institutional portion of those dollars. And then, truthfully, the best part of this grant that we were given is we're allowed to give grants directly to students in need. When 95% of your nursing students are on federal financial aid, and we're permitted to give them money because they have that need, by the end of this coming April, we will have given out over $600,000 of grants. So it doesn't need to be repaid directly to needy students. And these are, paying housing costs, food costs. They're paying costs because people stepped away from their jobs to become full-time nursing students. So it's really supported these families. It's going to be missed in April, honestly, because it truly makes a difference in the lives of those students. But, it's just been a blessing to be able to share that with our students. And we've actually taken some of our institutional money and moved it into this fund as well. So we've spent more money on grants than we have on the institutional portion by the time we're done. Scott, do you want me to talk about this, or do you want?
No, I think you've mentioned a little bit, but as Ed mentioned, I mean, the government was very good to help keep them at the highest cash balance they've had in years, and you can see this here. So without that, we would not be in a good position, but Ed and his team have done everything they can to provide the services to the folks that need it, and getting the grant funding that's available, and tapping into the federal funding that was there as well to keep it growing in a positive way.
Awesome, awesome. It just shows the commitment to workforce. At the end of the day, preparing students to be able to go out into the workforce and develop their careers from the bottom, from the very base level as an STNA in the healthcare profession, moving all the way up to LPN. So it's beautiful. It's all about workforce and making sure that folks are workforce ready in the most viable ways possible. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, and coming in 2022, commercial HVAC for our adults. So you'll see that program coming online soon.
Awesome. Good, good, beautiful. We've made some considerable gains over the years in that program with our in-school high school students. So awesome. Yes, Mr. Ragland has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. And I'm glad you mentioned HVAC. I'm wondering if there are other opportunities for expansion of the program. I'm thinking specifically around our needs for bus drivers and CDL training and how popular that is nationwide now. Have we identified an opportunity to, maybe bring that into the fold as a revenue generator for the district, understanding that the need is vast and we have a lot of folks that may want to attempt to acquire a CDL over the next couple of years or into the future. Has that been something that you've looked at?
We have not looked directly at the CDL portion of that because honestly, our transportation department has a wonderful program. Once they call them cadets, once they get their CDL permit from the state of Ohio, then they can actually be hired into the district, and the district handles all the training so that they get their CDL permit. Where adult education is becoming involved right now is we are working closely with the transportation department to make the training for the CDL permit testing more robust and more available to families. So we have a teacher who works directly with transportation, and we're helping them develop their program, the preparation program for the CDL permit. And I mean, communications is helping. They're videotaping training sessions so that we can take this to other sites other than Moeller. And we're really working directly on that. But as far as the actual seat, once they get their permit, the district can hire them. So our goal in adult education to help with this problem in the district is to get them passing their permit test.
Thank you. If there aren't any additional questions, we can move on.
And we will turn over to Ms. Wilkerson and the Latchkey Fund.
Good evening. Thank you, Board Member Cole, Treasurer Baharick, and members of the committee. I'd like to provide just a brief overview of our Latchkey program. We have been in existence since 1982. We started with 2 buildings, and now we are up to 24 buildings, providing high quality, safe, and affordable before and after school care for our school-age children, grades kindergarten through 8th. We're now in 21 buildings, and most of our schools are K through 5, but we do have 3 programs that are K-8 at Stewart's, Indianola, and Berwick. Our current program, as I stated, we have 21 programs, and these are served by 22 latchkey teachers and 26 instructional assistants. 14, as well as being licensed by the Ohio Department of Education, we also participate in the Step Up to Quality program, which is a 5-star quality rated program an improvement system administered by the Ohio Department of Education, which recognizes and promotes learning and development programs that meet quality standards, but that exceed the licensing and health and safety regulations. So approximately 70% of our programs are rated 4 stars or higher. In those areas, one of the ways that we get those higher rating is our staff. Our staff is very highly qualified and experienced. All of our teachers have at least a 4-year degree and a current teaching license. Our instructional assistants have either a 2-year degree or the equivalent, or they must pass the Parapro exam and maintain current instructional aid permit. Our staff is also required to complete yearly professional development hours and must also be certified in first aid, CPR, child abuse, and communicable diseases. We function from 7 a.m. until the school day begins at 9, and also after school until 6 p.m. Our registration process changed, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but our current fees are very affordable, especially compared to our neighboring districts. Students or families pay $55 per week for their AM care, $60 per week for their PM only care, and then $75 for both AM or PM. Our parents pay either out of pocket or they can use supplemental funds through publicly funded child care, PFCC through Title 20, and approximately 70 to 75% of our parents pay out of pocket. When we look at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, we first have to just talk about what we're doing at this time for the 21-22 school year. Our Latchkey program is experiencing a staffing shortage with lower than normal enrollment at some schools. This is directly related to the pandemic. There's increased staff absences due to COVID-related concerns. And also our hiring has been limited with the nationwide labor shortage. As a result, we've moved staff from lower enrolled schools to cover vacancies at other programs. And we're also working very closely with our partners in talent acquisition to address staff shortage and to post and promote our vacancies, especially in the area of latchkey substitute staff. The pandemic also forced us to change our registration process, but we believe that this change was extremely beneficial. During the 2021 school year, we wanted to decrease contact, so we switched to a completely online registration program. So parents have access to the links on the district website and can register at any time. If a program is full, then parents will receive a notification to either select another program or to contact our Latchkey office to be placed on a wait list. We also no longer accept checks or money orders at the building level, so our staff is not having to focus on finance management, but really focus on the instruction and care of our students. So online payments are available at every building with specific links for those buildings from the websites, and teachers can easily monitor their enrollment using that online system as well. We also learned that our staff needed more access to student information. So they have gotten privileges to access Infinite Campus, so they have access to student information. And they're also able to send information to parents using the Infinite Campus system. When we returned to school in the fall, due to the building closures, Latchkey teachers were assigned to support the core functions of the Digital Academy. And that also served as a district point of contact for students who were already enrolled in the program from the previous year. Our Latchkey IAs were assigned to the building at the discretion of the building principals to help support the learning at their buildings. When we resumed face-to-face in February of 2021, we followed the Responsible Restart Ohio guidelines and the CCS hybrid model. We decreased our capacity to 9-to-1 to follow those standards. And we also followed, again, that hybrid calendar with the teachers being able to provide virtual assistance on Wednesdays. Our online registration came online in January, and again, it was very, very successful. So we have continued that registration process. The other extremely exciting highlight that we've been talking about is that we received, we put an ESSER request for ESSER 2 funds to help to address the deficit from the year end with the reduce of parent revenue with the closures as well as the hybrid model. So the ESSER fund activity will be from this year, July of this year to June of 24, and we were awarded $6.3 million. The funds will be used to support the salary, fringe, consumable materials, the program supplies, and the staff professional development. So if you look at the next slide, you can see that traditionally or historically, our revenue has always exceeded our expenses. But again, with the pandemic related issues, the fiscal year 21 deficit was covered through a year-end advance from the general fund. And again, we have those ESSER 2 funds now to help recoup that amount as well as continue to maintain positive revenue moving forward. The next slide shows the breakdown of how we allocate those funds. You can see the majority of those funds are used for salary and wages. And then our fringe benefits take up a large portion of our funding as well. I know that I said a lot very quickly, but I'm happy to answer any questions the committee will has at this time.
Are there any questions for Dr. Wilkerson? All right. Thank you, Dr. Wilkerson. Thank you. I'm excited about the ESSER dollars that we're seeking to make available to help close gaps to ensure that families have what they need before and after school. So thank you for that. I just want to make sure, just for full transparency's sake, you mentioned that on the one slide where it shows revenue to expense, that we have exceeded more in revenue than we have in expense. And I'm looking at it, and it seems like it's the other way around.
I'm so sorry. Yes, that was the other way around. I apologize for that. The revenue has not exceeded, but we've maintained our balance by funds that we have accumulated over time. And what we have found, and one of the reasons why we had to address a fee increase, a tuition increase 2 years ago, was because we found that those funds on our end were slowly dwindling based on that parent revenue. So I apologize for that confusion. That is obvious by the slide, but the good news is that now we have these ESSER 2 funds that will help us to increase our revenue. And we hope that over time, our parent revenue will increase back to what it was prior to 2017, when we did exceed our expenses.
Absolutely. I thank you for this. We know that there's a definite need for affordable child care here in the city, and more importantly, education to accompany it in a way that prepares children for pre-K to first grade. So thank you for this. We know that there's a need, and I'll do whatever I can. I'm sure my colleagues will as well. Mr. Ragland.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Wilkerson. You had mentioned that around 70% of our parents were essentially private pay. Are we working to try and get more of our parents to participate utilizing the Title 20 funds? I mean, if they are available, how are we letting them know that those funds are available? What is our outreach plan to them to maybe increase participation in the Latchkey program, with those Title 20 funds being the driver for why folks can participate?
Thank you for that question. We promote the fact that we accept Title 20 in all of our communications when it comes to registration and recruiting and enrollment. What we find, though, is that our parents don't qualify for those funds. It seems to be kind of contradictory in such a large urban district, but the buildings that require and request latchkey are typically the buildings that have higher than average socioeconomic status. So those families do not qualify for PFCC because they are typically two parent working families. So we make sure that every family who has an interest in latchkey understands and knows how to set up their TAP program through PFCC. But again, most of our families do not qualify, and that's why you see that percentage.
That's
I have another
interesting.
I have another question.
Yes.
And so the language you used there is what triggered me a bit. You said those buildings that request latchkey are pretty much essentially in those higher socioeconomic neighborhoods. Have we identified a way to kind of rebrand latchkey in some of our poorer areas throughout the district so that maybe, it's really back to our equity discussion that we have all the time. Kind of like the rich get richer around here all the time. But if there may not be an organized structure within school buildings where we're serving more of our underserved population, I think it's incumbent upon us to be able to provide you with resources to help in those areas that might need them but might not know how to ask or if they need to ask. And so if we see that they're kind of clustered in some of the richer areas in town, how can the district help you, look at some of those more challenging schools that don't necessarily have the infrastructure through their parents, or the parents might not be knowledgeable about the types of programs that we can provide? How can the district help you do better in, not that you're not doing everything that you can now, but this is the finance committee, and so we can discuss what resources you may need to be able to serve in some of our areas that might not have some of the things that our richer areas may have.
Thank you for that comment and question. We can always look at providing latchkey at more sites across the district. Every building, we touch base with them at the beginning of the year to determine if there is a need. We have an actual parent feedback survey that we send to the buildings if they feel there is a need. In the past, in order for us to maintain our self-sustaining budget, we have needed to have at least 20 parents commit, or families commit, to the latchkey program in order for us to have enough revenue to fund a teacher, an instructional assistant, and the cost of the program. For instance, this year we had an interest at Woodcrest, and we did a hard marketing. We made phone calls, we worked with the building administrator and the team there, and unfortunately, based on the families at the building, we did not have enough families request interest in the program to support opening a program there. So again, I think it goes back to always trying for us to determine what the need is of that community and then address that need. A lot of our buildings where we do have those lower socioeconomic status, those families are not working, so they don't have a need for before and after school care. The parents are available to bring their students to school, but we always make sure that every building that does not currently have a program understands that we are ready and willing to provide program support at their buildings if we get the notification that we have enough families that are involved in interested in that service at that program.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for your response there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ragland. Mr. Bihort.
I just wanted to comment that this program, with Rochelle's leadership, has, on the operational side, been an early adopter of anything in the way of cash management that we've been able to offer. As she said, that we've gone to online payments. They're not focusing on collecting cash or checks or anything like that. So they have just always been open and inordinately receptive to making a change to improved processes from our perspective in terms of financial management and running it from a financial standpoint. So it's really, she can also be a guinea pig for us too, but don't tell her that. But it's been great to have a good idea on our side and then have somebody on the practicing side openly adopt that and put it to good use. So I just want to make that comment that because this is an enterprise and she's looking for ways, as she said, she mentioned it. My staff isn't spending time collecting money. We're spending time serving the needs of the students. And just a short story that when the pandemic hit, there was an afternoon or middle of the day, I can remember this, and I was standing outside the cabinet room and a decision had to be made. Parents needed to pay for their tuition for the next week or two. Do we collect tuition? Are we going to be closed? What are we going to do? What do we do about the program? How do we do this? And it came to me and I made a snap decision to say, keep the people on board. We'll keep them on payroll. We'll figure it out. Stop, don't charge parents for services that we don't render. And if I have to go to the board and explain that we need to transfer and advance money, I'll do that. And we made that decision. So fortunately, we did an advance so that on the books they were in the black. But then that advance comes back to the general fund, and now we have ESSER funding. So that decision kept, I think, Rochelle, it kept the people, the staff around, kept them paid, and now we have a way to figure that out. So I just want to say that was a pretty quick decision we had to make in about 5 minutes in a text and phone call, I think, in the hallway. So
Yeah.
with this program, we responded virtually instantaneously to the crisis and how we would manage it. So I'll just share that with you.
I thank you. If there are any additional comments, we'll move forward. Thank you so much, Ms. Wilkerson, for the presentation. I look forward to, as Mr. Ragland stated, seeing where we can possibly leverage Title 20. I've actually used that before when I ran the J. Ashburn Junior Youth Center. I think that's an awesome opportunity to see where we can leverage. I'd like to find out where those gaps and holes are maybe in the future. Thank you and be well.
Thank you.
All right, on to athletics with Dr. Clarno.
Yes, sir.
Well, hey, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Treasurer Bihort, Board Member Cole, members of the committee. I want to thank all of you for giving me an opportunity to be here with you this evening and share out some information. As Mr. Gooding shared at the top of the hour, athletics doesn't fit the exact model of what some of our other programs have been able to present here this evening, but I think it is still, I think there's information here that is relevant to your work and to the scope of our understanding on how, we move forward and how obviously these opportunities are provided for our school district. So ultimately, if I'm going to ask, if I could you go back one slide for me? That's possible. Thank you. Yeah. So ultimately, athletics within the school district are ran out of primarily what are called our 300 accounts, which are student activity accounts, which is a coding and a classification that comes, I believe, from the state of Ohio. I'm not sure which exact department. I don't know if that's an ODE measure or if that's some other entity that makes that earmark. But ultimately, what happens with those $300 is it really supports student-based activities. Athletics happens to be something that fits the niche of what a 300 account would apply to. And as you can see there, the purpose and the fund is provided to account for those student activity programs where we have students participating in activity but do not student management of the program. So that kind of gives you a scope of where athletics fall when it comes to 300 funds. Some of our program highlights, I think, which is really exciting, if we'll go ahead and go one slide, advance down, thank you kindly. One of the things that we were really excited about this year, right, was really just having the opportunity to bring back our full complement of activities to kids at both the middle school and high school level. We saw immediately, and obviously the board heard, central office heard, the superintendent heard, everyone heard the outcry from our community that COVID disrupted what was really an essential and key part to everything that we do here as a school district. Athletics are essential to young people's well-being. It is essential to the culture of the school. It just provides that healthy environment where some young people who are maybe not always as talented in some of the academia areas are able to still shine and showcase some of their other talents, whether it be athletics or band or drama. You just give, you know, your classmates an opportunity to show some of the wonderful things that you're able to do. Here in CCS, we have a pretty robust athletic program where, you know, we're a little bit different than everybody here in the state. As everyone knows, we're the largest school district in the state. But what I like to share often with my own staff is that we're the third largest school district in the Midwest. So only Chicago and Detroit are bigger than Columbus City. We're bigger than Indianapolis. We're bigger than Louisville. We're bigger than Pittsburgh. You know, we have to go all the way to Philadelphia on the East Coast before we find someone who kind of rivals in our size in what we do. And so we have 23 middle schools and Columbus City schools that offer interscholastic athletics in grades 7 and 8. And we have 16 high schools in grades 9 through 12 that offer interscholastic athletic programs. Through the direction of obviously our school district, and then also meeting the requirements of the Ohio High School Athletic Association, students who participate are, you know, have to meet a GPA standard, which in Columbus City schools is a 2.0 GPA, and then also the OHSAA credit requirement, which is the equivalency of 5 credits when they're participating in the interscholastic athletic program. Middle school students have the opportunity to participate in baseball, basketball, soccer, softball, track and field, and volleyball. And our high school students are able to participate in baseball, basketball, bowling, cross country, cheerleading, football, golf, soccer, softball, swimming, tennis, track and field, volleyball, and wrestling. Something that we are, you know, that makes us pretty unique when you're thinking about other, you know, athletic conferences in and around just here in Central Ohio. You know, many other athletic conferences are made up of multiple school districts. So multiple schools and multiple school districts. In turn, that means that there are a number of interests at each individual school district to be able to speak on behalf of their particular school's involvement. Columbus City Schools, and the uniqueness that we have is that we have one school district with multiple high schools, and thus in turn that allows us to offer league championships. We offer 27 overall league championships, 8 of those at the middle school level, and 19 individual high school league championships. The only one that does not have a consistent league championship is the sport of football in high school. That is due to the way that the Ohio High School Athletic Association runs the football postseason playoff for teams that qualify. And so it gives you a scope and an idea of really just kind of how big things are and all the wonderful things that we're able to do. As shared at the top of this highlight page, I'm excited that we were able to bring everything back, even though there are a number of COVID restrictions that are still in place. We have been able to get, you know, a lot of our teams restored and back up and running that essentially had been off for a while. Middle school had been down for a while, and so we had to push and pull a little bit in some different areas, and everybody kind of smiled at each other. And some days when we were struggling, we just said, hey, look, we're going to mush forward. We're going to push, keep on going, and find a way to provide this opportunity for our young people. The challenges, though, for COVID have been ongoing, and I honestly think that they are going to be a part of our world for probably 2 or 3 more years, even if we are not actually dealing with the restrictions, the effect that COVID had on the opportunity. A lot of young people and families, obviously, you know, maybe in some degree with that time off, they maybe have stepped away from their participation. And so we're trying to, you know, gather and like we like to use a term in school, shake the bushes and get kids back involved and say, hey, come on out. And you never know, you might actually enjoy participating if you give yourself a chance. So we're encouraging coaches, school leaders to, you know, make those sort of contacts with kids and say, hey, there's an opportunity here for you to be more connected to your school. But COVID, right? So in general, as you heard and shared from some other areas, over the past 18 to 20 months, the cost of equipment is really just continuing to go up, and we see that in all areas. A lot of those costs are maybe associated with obviously delays in shipping, and so manufacturers are increasing their prices to some degree on the items that we're used to being able to purchase and that are needed every day to be able to fulfill and carry out these athletic opportunities. Equipment delivery is on a delay. And so something that we've had to make sure that we're doing is really get out in front of our ordering process. You know, there was a time where you could order something and almost like an Amazon, right? Amazon would drop it off at your house the next day. And that was the same kind of piece for athletic equipment. But what has changed to a degree is that we really have to take that lead time into consideration when we're making some of the orders. Fewer guests are showing up to athletic events. So that means our athletic gates are down. Not everyone is comfortable being back in some of those large settings. And I know that as much as we maybe see on the news from time to time that people, you know, are excited and robust, there's still obviously a portion of every community that maybe is a little bit hesitant to be back in those large groups. And then finally, the individuals that work athletic events has decreased. We're having a challenge in being able to find, you know, something that has been shared, our officials, and that is not a local issue. That is a national issue. So if you go to the National Federation of High Schools, they have multiple articles on the officials shortage throughout the country, and not, you know, people just are not signing up as readily as they used to. We are working with you know, the different groups that go through the process. When people reach out to us, we connect into Ohio High School, who does the training for said officials to be able to get individuals who are interested. But it's just a national shortage, and it's something that I know ultimately will continue to, you know, it will correct itself through time, but time is something that we just have to be comfortable with. And so that kind of like gives you a scope of some of those COVID challenges that we've experienced. If you go to the next slide for me here, what this slide shares with you is the 5-year trend. I'm going to also pull it up on the screen here for me to be able to see it a little bit clear as well. But it begins with FY17, and it gives you a scope and idea as to what is essentially being earmarked on this slide as revenue. That number of the roughly 1.4 million that you see across FY17, 18, and 19 at a revenue standpoint, that is across multiple call centers in our school district. So that number is a totality of dollars that would have been brought in across you know, the 16 high schools and the 23 middle schools throughout the school district across multiple platforms. Those expenses that you see, obviously there was a great change in FY21. Obviously in FY20, so March of 20, we all get this information, and we do not continue and have any level of spring sports that year. So those sports that typically participate in the spring, the baseballs, the softballs, track and field, you know, boys tennis, those events did not occur that spring of 20. We began FY21, so the fall of 20 and spring of 21, that school year, we began under, you know, some very dire, strict COVID restrictions. There were not a large number of guests that were able to come and attend and watch, you know, student athletes participate. It was really limited to family and some of those things that we all can recall and remember. And so this year we're sort of rebounding and getting things back on track. But that gives you an idea as to really what has been the trend and how, you know, this call center has been affected with the COVID expenditures over that time frame, and especially in FY21. And so it'll really be interesting to see where things change and where we lie in FY22, and be able to reflect on that in comparison to what really has taken place the last 3 years, because it almost makes us start all over again with that FY19-20 year. We're like kind of that becomes almost a measuring stick, and where we have to kind of use to move forward per se. The next slide there shows obviously a pie chart on the expenditures and a very costly part of the expenditures, as all aspects of our organization or school district in that matter is that cost for salaries and wages and you know, being able to pay all these wonderful people who serve our school district as coaches. We have over 1,000 people across these 23 high schools and 16 high schools and 23 middle schools. You know, there's over 1,000 people that in some form or fashion are participating and sharing of their time. And while, you know, I've been a coach in our district, I've been a teacher in our district, I've been a building administrator, I know the long hours that coaches put in. And a lot of times when, what we see as the public coming in, we see that body of work that takes place during their season. What typically is not shown or doesn't really, isn't something that everyone really notices are those, those days of training and the weightlifting and the work and the late hours on the phone, or just being an added mentor to a kid and talking to them out of season and doing all the wonderful things that make coaches special. I share before I finish here. One of the things that I've learned in education, I'm 20 plus years in this process, and I share this with coaches, is that there is one title in education that never changes, and that title is coach. And the example that I give is that I was fortunate enough as an educator. I graduated from Columbus Walnut Ridge here, and then four short years later, I was back teaching at Walnut Ridge. And about 80% of the staff that was there when I was a student, that staff was still there when I became a teacher and one of their colleagues. And many teachers that, taught me as a student shared to me, they said, hey, Vince, you can call me by my first name. And I said, oh, okay, sure, and I fell right in line with some of them. And I still, to this day, I remember my high school basketball coach, he shared that same sentiment. He said, hey, if you want, you can call me by my first name. Here we are 20 plus years later. Every time I speak to him, I still call him coach. There would be no way I could ever call him by his first name. It would be a level of disrespect. And so I emphasize with coaches, you get to carry this title for your entire life. The young people that I coached when I was at Walnut Ridge, even as adults now, they see me and they still call me coach, and you get to be coach forever. And so I think that's a pretty unique opportunity for someone who is getting the opportunity to share as a coach. We've been blessed here in athletics to have some great guidance and leadership. Obviously, Dr. Dixon, Dr. James being on board, and then me. I am so excited being able to work with Dr. Klein on all aspects of what we're doing and moving forward. And so I'm excited what this year holds and in the years to come.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clarno. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Just a quick comment.
Yes, sir.
This fund, as Vince explained early on, this is not really an enterprise fund. We do have an annual transfer of support into this fund to support that operational side. General fund does pick up the cost for supplemental contracts for coaches.
Yes, that's correct.
This is just a picture of their operational side, and the board does support that on an annual basis. And I don't know whether, I'm not real sure our term that we use here, Vince, do we refer to your program as co-curricular or extracurricular?
Extracurricular.
Yeah, well, I will take exception to that. I had an AD up in Worthington who emphasized very much that these aren't extra, these are in fact co.
That's right.
And so in Worthington, if you care, we call them co-curricular because they are co to the curricular program. And so I can tell you as a former participant in the co-curricular activities here in Columbus City Schools, that they are in fact a concurrent program that runs alongside the academic program to support our students. So Vince, if I ever make that mistake, which I doubt that I do, but when I talk to Vince, I will refer to these always as co-curricular activities. That's my comment. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I absolutely agree, especially when we be bold enough to raise that GPA to 2.5, right? You definitely co-curricular. I wanted that at 2.5, at least 2.3, but I appreciate it where we are, and I appreciate the term. I think that's something for us to deliberate on moving forward. So thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, and Dr. Clarno, thank you, and Dr. Klein for all of the work that you all are doing and continue to do. I think it's very important for this committee, particularly in your function as the millage committee moving forward, that you learn a lot more about what Dr. Clarno and the athletics department means to not only the students in the district, but to the broader community. When you all start talking about what it is that we are going to need resources for our students moving forward, athletics will be a hot button issue that will make or break your function as a millage committee. And I want to make sure that I emphasize that to you. Do not underestimate the power that Dr. Clarno and our coaches and all of those athletics students can wield in championing the community to provide more resources to this district if there is a semblance of a plan. And if you think about some of the new things that are occurring in the landscape of athletics, it's very important. Our suburban, you mentioned Worthington, our suburban partners are recruiting students from Columbus City schools to go and play for their teams in those suburban schools. A part of what they are using to take students from this district, and that is a specific revenue discussion for this committee, a part of what they are using to entice students to move to other communities is their athletic facilities. And so as you go through the rest of this facilities master plan, understand that we are losing some of our highest performing athletes on a yearly basis to our suburban partners because they don't feel like that we're providing them the resources that they need to be successful in Columbus City schools. And so this committee is going to have a millage function that's going to be coming up. We've got facilities master planning that is underway. It would be my recommendation that Dr. Clarno be as close to you as possible as you discuss those things and start articulating what a plan would look like for revenue for this district, because we can lament it all we want, but it is very important to those that will be voting, and it can make or break our success moving forward. So that is my comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, here, here. Agreed. Okay, moving forward to WCBE. Thank you, Mr. Clarno.
Thank you very much. Nice to see everyone.
Well, good evening. Thanks for saving the best for last. Chair Cole, members of the board, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to talk about WCBE. Let me first, as I always do with this committee, answer the question, why is your executive director of family engagement standing up here talking about a radio station? As you all know, that WCBE falls under the Department of Communications and Engagement, which is why tonight I'm also going to be joined by our Chief Communications Officer, Scott Wortman, who will share a little bit about the future of the station, as well as Paul Brown, my communications colleague, who will also be taking more of a leadership role in working with the radio station. But for my part, let me just share, WCBE continues to be that unique budget and unique asset in Columbus City Schools. Unlike 2019, big picture, there are no major surprises, either in revenue or expenses for WCBE this current school year. Nothing of surprise or different from what we saw last school year, with a couple of minor exceptions. And then the potential for a significant change as we look to next school year. A few highlights to share, as you see on the screen, that we are in the midst of an academic visioning process that's underway to really expand the opportunities for our students to be engaged in the radio station, to be part of our learning program, and Chief Wortman will talk about that in just a minute. If I can, let me just hit on the financial highlights. Our fundraising continues to show very slight and modest gains that did fall during the heights of the pandemic. As you see, the fall fund drive that just wrapped up had a very similar outcome to the spring fund drive that we saw earlier in the year. Underwriting, however, does continue to see some nice gains. Underwriting, if you'll recall, is the public radio station equivalent to advertising. I'll explain kind of why there's the changes there, but as you can see, compared to the same time frame in 2020, we've seen a more than doubling of the dollars that come in underwriting. It's also important to note that we have repaired a relationship that we had with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, again, kind of referencing back to 2019 when there were some challenges at the radio station. Some of the dollars that we typically receive from the federal government through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting had to be returned, and so we did not get that revenue. But as you can see, for 21 and 22, we are back on in receiving dollars and support from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Some impacts that I want to make sure to highlight. Again, as we talk about underwriting and advertising, it's important to note that about 70% of the money that WCBE gets in underwriting comes from local promoters and venues and promotions and performances, which during COVID were all shut down. As we start to see more of those venues come back, performances start to ramp up, especially in the music industry, we're starting to see more of those opportunities for underwriting come back. And we hope as that industry continues to regain its footing, we'll continue to see some of those advances in underwriting. It's also good to note that when we look at membership, and that's where we get in the other significant part of our dollars, that the number of members who join, who commit to donating to WCBE actually has flattened, and there's actually been some decreases compared. But our focus continues to be on sustaining donations. That is, once we get someone's credit card to make that donation, that we keep that and work that donation is able to then continue month to month, as opposed to some of the previous processes where we would have to send out billing to follow up and, where's your check this month? Where's your check next month? And so that sustaining membership has been important. The station also, just given the early indicators for donations, do expect that their end of year efforts here in the next couple of months, they're hoping to see some good returns on that. And that's the annual year-end giving solicitation that they do, as well as their great partnership with the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, the Fresh Cut Food Drive, that for every donation, there's a community partner that then will share food with the Mid-Ohio Food Collective. So it's a great partnership. And then there's the last point, and this is where I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chief Wortman, is that we know that giving, as well as expenditures, might also be impacted by the academic visioning process that we are undertaking and what it will mean for next year. So to give you more about that academic visioning process, I'll turn it over to Chief Wortman.
Thank you, Mr. Varner. Chair Cole, committee. As he mentioned, the Departments of Academic Services and Communications and Engagement are collaborating on creating a student-centered vision for the future of WCBE for the Board of Education to consider. This new vision will include curriculum and student activities that align with the operations of the station, giving students hands-on, workforce-ready experience and unique educational opportunities. We plan to show how this district asset can be an educational program integrated into current and future curriculum, classes, and co-curricular activities. As part of our visioning process, we're considering models that other school districts are using. For example, we're looking closely at the Summit WAPS public radio station, which is owned by Akron Public Schools in Northeast Ohio. Much like WCBE, the Summit focuses on community partnerships and supporting local musicians. The Summit, which is embedded in Akron's Ellett High School, also incorporates hands-on, authentic multimedia experiences for career tech students, along with curriculum-aligned opportunities in social studies, English, unified arts, world language, and more. Our expectation is to have this vision completed by the next time we come to FAC in February. It will include an outline of how WCBE would align with our academic priorities and the associated costs of the student-centered vision. One thing I'll also note for the committee today is that I do not expect the academic vision to be self-sustaining. I believe that the Board of Education will need to consider allocating general funds to support the implementation and integration of WCBE into our curriculum and student activities. I look forward to sharing more information in the coming months with this committee.
With that, Chair Cole, that was the presentation I wanted to share with you, the updates as part of the online presentation and the handouts that you have. You can see the expenses and the revenues for the last few years. And again, this year is currently on track to match where WCBE was last year.
Thank you, Mr. Varner. Are there any questions? Mr. Brown, you have a question?
Just a really quick question. On the slide where you show the numbers for fundraising and for underwriting, and you show two numbers for each of those. I think it would be helpful, at least to me, to go back some further and give us some sense of, what these numbers are in context. These numbers all came during COVID. How far off are they from, previous years? And then give us, some comparison. Obviously, it may change again in the future, but I'd appreciate that.
And that would be, yes, thank you, Mr. Brown. We will look to do that for future sessions. In general, I can tell you that they are significantly low compared to where the station was maybe even 6, 7, 10 years ago. That we continue to see lower numbers of folks who donate to the station. And there are a number of reasons for that, including listenership and the economy and the pandemic, a number of different things that have impacted WCB's ability to attract donors. Thank you.
And I understand that, of course. So I guess where it says that fundraising continues to show slight gains, and these numbers show a slight decline, is there some place where there was a gain?
So those numbers, I look at those numbers as being pretty equal, approximately right about that $65,000 amount. The gains would be compared to fall and spring of the year before.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for that synopsis and that review. And we look forward to seeing where there's a stronger marriage between our curriculum, expansion opportunities in this space, and even some area for, enterprising and entrepreneurship on the part of the district to develop for itself, unrestricted dollars that could be delegated towards growth of these programs for our kids and for the community to enjoy as well. So thank you for that. Are there any other additional comments or questions? Awesome. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
With that in mind, Mr. Treasurer?
Thank you. And Chair Cole, if it's okay with you, because I have my staff here, I will proceed with item 5.01, our quick discussion of the reorganization and some staff introductions, but I will ask to pass on the intranet site 502. Not that important. It's 6:04, and you have a little project here in about 26 minutes.
Yes, we do.
So what I wanted to do for you this evening was discuss with you a little bit about my reorganization that we did. As you might recall, back in March, we had a rather significant event with the unanticipated departure of one of our key members. And at that point in time, we immediately went into, as one described, triage. One of our members said we wanted to triage, to reassign duties, to pick up the work that was not being covered. And then we decided to add insult to injury and began to consider reorganization. I think it was Rahm Emanuel who said, "Don't ever let a good crisis pass you by." And so we jumped in on that at that point in time. At that point, this is something like what my office looked like. There was the controller and kind of over the accounts payable and payroll functionality. I had an IT systems manager that worked primarily in the payroll area. We had created during my tenure a director of data and processes to look at process and improvement. And in October of 20, the budget department, grant and budget department, was as a result of PDK audit. They suggested the budget report to the CFO. Part of that was split off grants management. Catherine Mosher, that's what department she took, and we took all the budget analysts and numbers folks, and this fellow beside me here to my left. So that's what it looked like. It happened. I won't say on accident, but when Scott and his team came over, we just plugged them in. The director of process improvement that kind of morphed out of some other positions of growth. It wasn't, quite honestly, very well thought out. And so we took the time to say, let's stop and take a look at what we want to do. So our process was something like this. The three of us sat down with some other staff help. We just looked at all our functions and all the things that we do, and we laid that all out. And then we regrouped them to make some sense out of it. How do these pieces fit together? We wanted to design a better hierarchical design because one of my charges from the board was to create capacity, in Board Member Cole's words, capacity, and some opportunities for career growth, and also what's that planning called? Succession planning, I'm sorry, escaped me. So to build that into the organizational design. So after we laid that out, we took our current positions and plugged them in. We knew we had to create some new positions, and then we went about the process of assigning staff and engaging in employment. You don't need to read all the details here, but this is an idea of what we were looking at when we mapped everything out. Functions and reports and all of that. Key here is some of the pink items that we felt the controller had done before and how we grouped them. And you can see that some of them, the vast majority of them, lodged under operations. Others were spread out over to budget and control. And then the right-hand side, process improvement, and really a new functionality for my office, didn't take over any of those responsibilities. So what we came up with, and we might have seen this to begin with, but we did build it from the bottom up, so it's not terribly novel, but it is now grounded in us actually building it up from the function up to this type of organization. We have a branch called Financial Operations, Finance and Budget, and Data and Processes with the related groupings of activities there. Going a little bit more into detail so that you can see it, hopefully color-coded here for you. Operations, you can see there's payroll and cash management and accounts payable. And over under finance, we've got the budget analysts and our area treasurers. They used to be under that process improvement person. They didn't belong there, so we moved them over under finance and budget. And then the blue line of that new process improvement and data analysis functionality that I wanted to build in the office. In terms of positions and the hierarchy, so there's this vertical look, financial operations, finance and budget, and data and processes. And then the horizontal look, beginning with an executive director level, supporting that level are the directors, then a level of analysts and supervisors, and then staff there. And that allows for some upward mobility, upward progression in the organization. Also coverage, if you will, if there's a vacancy that occurs somewhere along the line. In terms of those two top levels and positions that I either repurposed or created new or were existing, just wanted to show you here that what we did was for the executive director of financial operations, that was a repurpose of a position. We repurposed the controller's position to that position, changed the job description, some functionality a bit. Did take quite a bit of the controller's duties, but still somewhat different. Added a director's position to support that. Finance and budget, Mr. Gooding, his position existed, but to have a director support him, we repurposed two other positions, one into this director's position, one into a lower level position. And then for data and processes, we had the director's position, but we wanted an executive director to lead that, so that the executive director was new and the other was existing. So you can see out of those 6 positions, 2 were the result of repurposing, 2 were existing, and only 2 were brand new. What I'd like to do right now is introduce to you the staff members that are filling these key positions for me. I've got to, I talked and I didn't advance the slide. See, there's the picture, repurpose, existing, new. That's what I was talking from. It was on my screen, it wasn't on your screen. Okay. Let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to ask my staff to stand up, kind of come up front so you can see who they are. We'll begin with financial operations. Get over to my Word document. Tito Reynolds. Tito joins us from Dayton Public Schools.
Dayton Public Schools. Mm-hmm.
He was the assistant treasurer there, graduate of Wright State University. He's got auditor of state office experience. He worked for Montgomery County, and as a seasoned public finance individual, he has over 20 years in government accounting experience. He is a licensed CPA on my team. Joining him, another new employee, Karen Seibert, Director of Financial Operations. She joined us most recently. She was Finance Director at the City of Powell. I keep wanting to say Village of Powell. That's because I've been here too long. City of Powell. But she actually spent, I think, 10 years up working for a good friend of mine at Shaker Heights City Schools as his assistant. She also has several years of experience as a school treasurer in another district. So the two of them are brand new. So over in operations, we threw the both of them into the deep end of the pool, and we wish them the best of luck. Next in line is the fellow sitting beside me, Scott Gooding, Executive Director of Finance. He's been with the district since early in 2014, about 6 months prior to my joining the district. He too is a seasoned veteran with over 25 years of school finance experience. He's been treasurer at least 3 other school districts that I know of, or at least that he'll admit to, Westerville City Schools being one of them. He is a frequent presenter at professional associations, and in his work with our budgeting process, he is a member of the Alliance for Excellence in School Budgeting with the GFOA, or the Government Finance Officers Association. The next person in line is Terry Addison. He's our Director of Finance and Budget. Terry has been with the district for, I guess, over 20 years. He was in our office in another capacity as the Comprehensive Continuous Improvement Plan Administrator. That's a mouthful, but Terry was my right-hand person for letting me know when I should sign something when it came to grants, and does all that reporting for us. But this was a great opportunity as we redesigned the office and created that opportunity for career advancement. And Terry is a good example of that. He was able, in essence, this was a promotional opportunity for Terry. And it's truly, and I think I mentioned this at ANA when I talked about it, it was one of those experiences where you lay all this out on paper and you wonder if it's really going to work. You wonder if people really care. Well, we did that, and Terry was very enthusiastic, and I could tell that he cared about the opportunity to do more for the district and be recognized for his potential and past contributions, and put him in this role as director. So he brings a wealth of knowledge and experience within the district to his new position, and has gone full bore on this job. Next in line, if I do this correctly, if it'll advance for me, is Jenny Vanover. You hear me talk a lot about Jenny because I've known Jenny for a long time. She joined the district in December of 14, about 4 months after I joined the district. There's a lot of stories and joking about whether or not I participated in her hiring, which I did not. I let the team do that. But Jenny has been one that I've pretty much handed just about anything I wanted to. I gave it to Jenny. And that's why I said that position just was a hodgepodge of things. Jenny learned after a while that when I would ask her, Jenny, what do you know about this? That she should say nothing. I don't know anything about that. I'm not so sure that would have worked, because I probably would have given it to her anyway, because I would have said, good, you know something about it, and give it to her. Or if she said, I don't know anything about it, I would say, well, this will be a great learning experience for you. But now she's finally being able to move more and more into this process improvement and data verification functionality. And we're really looking forward to what she will be able to lead us into there. Then supporting her in Jenny's previous position as Director of Financial Process Improvement is Becky Rowe. She comes to us from SERS, School Employees Retirement System, and she is, if I'm not mistaken, just you and I are graduates of Columbus, I believe, in the group, correct? All right, so there's 2 of us that are graduates of Columbus Schools. And she too is very experienced with 24 years of public sector experience, again, SERS being the most recent. And in that organization, you might not have noticed a certain little box that is kind of off to the side, right under where I am positioned at the enviable position of top of the chart. Right off to the right is a position, Director for Financial Affairs, someone that I needed to help me coordinate all of these activities. This is a very large organization. With the addition of Scott and his team and several of the new positions, I think we're at around 60 employees in total in that overall organization. So I needed somebody to help coordinate it, and quite frankly, because he was already living in my office most of the time, I reached out to Eric and said, how would you like to come over from the academic side to the dark side? And he just jumped on that opportunity. And so Eric is our new Executive Director for Financial Affairs. And coordinating just about everything. My work when I go to the State House, coordinating the work where our departments, although they are vertically aligned, they must be horizontally integrated. And he manages that and shepherds that, if you will, each and every day. He's a great interface with other departments and entities outside the district as well. So Eric joins us and very unique because he comes to us from having served in all branches of the state government, the governor's office, the Ohio School Facilities Commission, the Democratic Caucus. He's just had a lot of that state government work and exposure in being a persuasive lobbyist, if you will. So that really is a very different set of experiences that he brings that is going to help our office interface with others within the district and outside of the district. So this is the team I've assembled. I personally think it's the best team that in the state of Ohio right now, and I'm proud to introduce them all to you. And so if you've got any questions or if they want to say anything or you'd like to grill them on something, have at it, but you've only got about 2 minutes before we got to get out of this room.
Well, if there's no comment, it's a pleasure to meet you all. We look greatly forward to working with you, and welcome to the family. Yeah.
Welcome to all of you.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
That concludes my report. I'd love to go over the intranet site perhaps next time. This is something that Eric has worked with the team to put together. I think it's pretty cool. It's live. You really can't get to it because of the intranet, but we'll show it to you at some point. Pretty cool.
Thank you so much for that. I look forward to future. All right, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motioned and second. Can you call the roll, Mr. Treasurer?
Sure. Chair Cole,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Board Member Ragland,
Yes.
and Board Member Brown.
Okay.
That motion carried and you're adjourned. Thank you.